We ready?
Yep.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm gonna call this special meeting of the Laguna Beach City Council to order. Anne Marie, could we please start with a roll call?
Councilmember Jones. Here. Councilmember Kemp. Here. Councilmember Whalen.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Orgel.
Here.
Mayor Renagi.
Here, and then I guess we're gonna be doing the Pledge of Allegiance on this. Councilmember Kemp, do you want to lead us?
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag,
United
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll make sure to also do that during the regular meeting. So let's kick off. We're here for a presentation on the facilities master plan. I think, and I don't know, Gavin, if you have any input, but in terms of public feedback, do you want to give your presentation? Maybe we ask questions, then hear from the public, and then go to council comments. Does that work with what you're planning?
Yes, I think so.
Okay,
That
good.
works great. Thank you, Mayor.
So do you want to kick us off, Gavin?
I can. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Gavin Curran, Assistant City Manager. And joining me today, who will be doing the majority of the work on the presentation today, is Dustin Alamo with Griffin Structures and Charlie Williams with LPA Design Studios. I would also like to recognize the ad hoc committee of Mayor Renagi and Mayor Pro Tem Orgel, who have provided actually important insight and leadership actually throughout this process. Today, we're going to go through the Facilities Master Plan workshop. We're going to focus on concepts in Group 1, which prioritize public safety, core services, immediate community benefits. Those include relocating Fire Station 1, improvements to the library, improvements to the Forum Theater, some Lang Park enhancements, and potentially housing at the Community and Recreation Center. We'd like to use the workshop to get feedback and direction from the council and the Group 1 efforts. Did we prioritize those right? Did we get things right? And talk about if the council would like to do any additional workshop, community outreach, or any other feedback. So also, just to note, in the staff report, we did put a couple discussion topics if the council wants to look to those as we work through the presentation. But those are there just for discussion purpose to help with the conversations as we work through this master plan, and Dustin can kind of touch on those as we get through. And finally, I just wanted to thank the community, Griffin Structures, LPA, and of course the ad hoc committee and the staff. Obviously, there are thoughtful and collaborative efforts all throughout this process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dustin.
All right, everyone hear me? Okay, so good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. We're excited to provide an update on the facilities master plan today. This effort's more than just buildings. It's about aligning community services with real needs, both today and into the future. So our presentation today focuses on 4 main goals. First, we're going to update you on where we are in the master planning process and how we got here. Second, we'll walk through a clear tiered prioritization framework that organizes projects based on urgency, feasibility, as well as community value. Third, we're going to spotlight near-term projects, those we believe are most aligned with current need and momentum, including some already tied to funding opportunities. And finally, we're here to gather your feedback. This is a conversation starter, not a conclusion, and your input's critical to shaping what comes next. So our process is really built around a 5-prong approach. We started listening to the community and understanding the conditions of each of the facilities, looking at all the infrastructure components. And then we moved into space programming, which essentially asks, are these facilities sized and configured for the way you work today and the way you'll need to serve the community tomorrow? This means projecting future staffing levels, program growth, operational shifts, and community use patterns. After that, we began to organize and prioritize. Not every project can or should happen at once, so we developed a framework to help the city make thoughtful decisions about phasing, funding, and impact. The ultimate goal here is to align facility investments with the city's evolving needs so that buildings not only function well, but also reflect the values and priorities of Laguna Beach. So there are 26 facilities included in this plan, some owned, some leased. They're broken into these 6 categories. Civic admin includes City Hall, the Public Works Annex, and the Corporation Yard. Of course, the library. From a public safety perspective, we have fire stations 1, 2, and 3, the PD, lifeguard, headquarters, and the animal shelter. Parks and Rec, we have the CRC, Suzy Q, as well as Lang Park Community Center. On your leased facilities, we have Festival of Arts, the Playhouse, as well as the Lost Pier Cafe. And then parking areas, we have a number of parking lots here at the village entrance, as well as a Hagen Place slot. So once all these facilities were identified, we initiated the facility condition assessment. As mentioned, this looked at all the infrastructure components, including seismic integrity, mechanical systems, electrical systems, ADA accessibility, roof life. Each facility was given a rating from fair to excellent, and we've aggregated those by group here. What we found was encouraging in some cases, but concerning in others. For example, public safety buildings generally perform well, but still have some critical issues like seismic and water-related risks. Civic and admin group has similar concerns, and the library is showing aging in its envelope finishes and systems. Overall, the total estimated maintenance for these facilities over 20 years is about $314 million. Of course, this is not all urgent work, but it does represent the cost of responsibly stewarding these assets over time. And of course, deferring maintenance only compounds risk and costs, so part of our goal is to get ahead of that curve. So then we move into the space needs. We evaluated whether each facility is the right size for its use. This needs analysis looked at existing square footage compared to what's ideal based on staffing, service levels, and best practices for each department. There are some significant gaps. The PD, for instance, is operating with half the space it needs, as the original building was constructed for a much smaller force. The fire department is short by 10,000 square feet over its system, which impacts housing for growing crews and modern apparatus equipment. City Hall and the corporate yard are also operating below their ideal sizes, which can affect their daily operational efficiencies. At the same time, we saw opportunities like at the CRC, where there's more space than needed for current and planned use, opening up potential for rethinking how that site serves the community. So in total, we identified a shortfall of about 62,000 square feet across these facilities. That's a signal that facilities are being outgrown or reimagined in ways that need more space to function effectively. Now, we've developed a number of solutions to address all these facilities, which have been presented to the community in the most recent April town hall, though we realize the magnitude of these options don't necessarily align with the funding capability. So that's why we're here to discuss prioritization. So let's talk about the costs. We've developed preliminary cost ranges for each of these facility groups. They're grounded in current market rates and assume no escalation over time. So these reflect really what it would cost if we acted today. Most of the ranges can vary widely depending on whether or not we're doing a renovation versus new construction. For example, the PD could cost anywhere between $27 to $71 million, depending how much of the sites were used or rebuilt. Similarly, the cultural venues like the Playhouse or Festival of Arts have large ranges based on potential scope and partnerships, but can certainly be scaled to address funding goals. So in total, the cost to address all the needs falls between 186 to 440 million. This is certainly a significant number, but it provides context and clarity for long-term planning. It's not a one-time ask, but it's a guide for phase investment over a 10, 20, even 30-year period. So from the beginning, we've also made community input a cornerstone of this plan. Over the past year, we've held stakeholder meetings, pop-up events, town hall, maintained online outreach through the city's website, as well as social media platforms. We've heard consistently that public safety is a #1 priority. People want to know that their fire, PD, and marine safety teams have the right facilities to serve effectively. There's also strong support for improving the CRC and Suzy Q, especially around enhancing family-friendly amenities. On the art side, we heard desire for affordable rehearsal and more creative spaces. We also heard clear preference for keeping the library in its current location with better parking, safety, and space. Finally, we heard strong interest in a new community pool and rethinking some of the city's recreational infrastructure. Importantly, the feedback didn't just validate what we saw in the data, it helped us shape the real solutions that align with what most matters to residents. So to make this path a little more clear, we've grouped the facilities into 3 strategic tiers. The projects within these groups can certainly be moved around based on the city's input and direction, but it's a starting point to help facilitate this conversation. This allows the city to take a phased approach, focusing first on foundational needs, then moving towards strategic upgrades, and then finally long-range community investments. So Group 1 includes core public safety and community serving projects that address urgent issues like seismic risk, ADA compliance, or basic infrastructure replacement. Group 2 includes facilities that expand services and improve efficiency, like modernizing fire stations 2 and 3, or easing space strains at City Hall and PD through targeted renovation and infill approaches. And Group 3 is really where full transformation happens, like reimagining the City Hall PD campus, enhancing cultural anchors, or creating destination community hubs. These are ambitious but necessary conversations for the future. Again, the structure is not rigid, but it's meant to help the city organize, focus, and plan with clarity and flexibility. So let's take a quick review of each of these groups in greater detail. The 5 projects as part of Group 1 are what we call high impact and near term. They solve real problems today, create visible wins for the community, and in many cases, they already have potential funding strategies identified. This includes replacing Fire Station 1, which is one of the city's oldest and most vulnerable facilities. The library project also includes either the option for a modern reinvestment or a more aspirational renovation and expansion. On the Forum Theater, there's a couple options for ADA improvements to improve accessibility. There's a lighter renovation project guided for Lang Park, which includes relocating the pickleball courts and adjacent sports field to address some neighborhood noise challenges. And then finally, a reimagined CRC that introduces residential units alongside a more focused recreation strategy to serve as revenue opportunity for creating funding for future city facilities, a creative approach to one of the city's most prominent and flexible sites. So the total cost for Group 1 is between $52 and $80 million. These are investments, we believe will deliver high value and create momentum for the rest of the plan. Moving to Group 2, we shift the focus to a more strategic expansion and modernization. These projects don't carry the same level of urgency, but they're critical for the city operational health over the next 10 years or so. We're talking about modernizing Fire Stations 2 and 3 here, which will complete the system-wide fire infrastructure update. We're also proposing targeted renovations and infill at the City Hall and Police Department, which would alleviate some of that space concerns that we talked about without a total rebuild. Marine Safety Headquarters is another important project, especially to improve the coverage in South Laguna and support seasonal lifeguard demands. Corporate Yard project would increase field operations and help alleviate the longstanding parking challenge on that campus. And lastly, the Village Entrance District offers an exciting opportunity for a public-private partnership to add housing or parking while reinforcing the character of the area. So Group 2's estimated budget ranges from 84 to 131 million, and these just build on the momentum of Group 1. And finally, Group 3, which represents a more long-term vision. These projects transform how Laguna Beach shows up for residents, artists, and visitors. They're not urgent fixes, but bold investments in culture, identity, and community infrastructure. This group includes the full redevelopment of the City Hall and PD, providing a cohesive modern civic campus that supports operation and enhances community access. The Lang Park heavy redevelopment takes that site to its full potential with a comprehensive rebuild. Now, it's important to note here too that the full redevelopment options are mutually exclusive with the Group 2 upgrades. For example, If the city were going to pursue the Group 3 City Hall and PD development, they wouldn't also do the infill approach in Group 2. Same is true for Lang Park. You wouldn't do both the light and the heavy version. It's kind of either or. So these are forks in the road that are really part of the strategy discussion, deciding on which approach offers the most long-term value and feasibility. On the arts and culture front, we have major enhancements to the Festival of Arts, the Laguna Playhouse and Lost Pier, all key destinations that represent Laguna's creative and coastal spirit. There's also support for a more robust animal shelter and an improved Suzy Q Center to serve the seniors better. Group 3 projects are a higher price tag, ranging from $224 million to $320 million, but they also carry a long-term return on investment in the form of pride, civic pride, tourism, and quality of life. These are aspirational goals that we can begin planning now, even if execution happens over time. Okay, so now you have a high-level snapshot of the full facilities master plan. We've developed strategies and solutions for each facility in the system, and we can pull up any facility if you want to look at that in greater detail. But today, we're going to narrow focus into Group 1 facilities, those near-term, high-priority projects we believe are most ready for advancement. To walk you through those details, I'm going to hand it over to our project architect, Charlie Williams, who will dive deeper into each project within Group 1. Charlie?
Thank you, Dustin. Members of the council, thank you for having us here today. It's a real opportunity to be able to share with you some of the ideas that we have to share, and it's been a really long journey. We've met with a lot of people from the council. We've met a lot of people from the community and tried to listen to the best of our ability of what the needs of the community are. And as Dustin has framed up for us, that we're just looking at a suggestion of some initial projects. And if we could go to the next slide there. Sure. What you have here is the village lot just adjacent to us here, where we're all accustomed to seeing the farmers market for the most part. And when we started this project, the task was to look within the facilities that we were provided. So looking across the portfolio of properties that the city had, this was the one that made the most logical sense for a new fire station. The fire station that's here adjacent to us has far outlived its life from a seismicity perspective, the scale of it. And we've also talked a lot with the staff there that relocating the fire department just a little bit further down Laguna towards Laguna Canyon Road would dramatically improve their response times. When we talk about response times, it's seconds matter, and by moving that down, does pick them up a couple seconds of response time through Laguna Canyon and the northern parts of Laguna Beach. So we chose to focus an opportunity, a design option here. What you see is the site. For the most part, there's one major constraint that we have there. Next to the channel is the easements that are providing some electrical elements there. So we've used those as the constraints. Those are kind of the V-shaped dotted lines that you see there. Also to help kind of give us an indicator of what may be happening around the site. Over in blue, you'll also see a dashed line representing the footprint, approximate footprint of some of the parking structure design options that have been shared with LPA. We did not do a detailed zoning analysis on this. This was trying to minimize the impact on this area of the site. We know it's a critical part of this community, and we know the farmers market goes there. So how do we try to preserve some of the space that was reserved to that, and maybe consider as part of this, the space that you see here is approximately the amount of space that's on the parking lot adjacent. So the very easy move is to kind of move the farmers market over into that other parking lot and still allow that to preserve. If we could go to the next slide. This is one idea of how a two-story structure might present itself on the site. And one of the things that we're accustomed to today that might be very different from what you see here is the way the fire apparatus is back into the parking, the apparatus bays today. As we move further down and closer to Laguna Canyon Road, we all know how congested that area can be and how it's actually quite a bit tighter than the intersection that we have there. So the idea that the fire apparatus would back up into this location as they do today was very limited. So we started to explore how would you actually create a pull-through in this particular lot. So that's why we took up a little bit more of the lot than you might initially perceived. We have a trash enclosure, we have the generator, both requirements of this type of facility, which is an essential facility. It does have to have additional seismic requirements accommodated for it, so it's stronger in the event of an earthquake. Here, you're seeing the footprint of the first floor. We have some admin space in the front, support space, and the living space. And then upstairs on a second story, so that we try to maintain the approximate mass and scale of the existing city hall that's there. We do have some more support space and some additional living space to accommodate what the needs are. So you can see programmatically, the need is about 11,600, and we've been able to provide that amount of space on the first and second floor to accommodate that.
Including fire admin.
Including the fire admin. Now, there is an option that we've talked about here that you could increase that by an additional 3,000 square foot by putting a third story on this that would allow for an EOC, which was one of the programmatic requirements identified by the fire department as being needed there. Personally, I think that would be a challenge when it comes to mass and scale. I don't know it's really consistent with what we have here today. From a parking perspective, the programmatic need was 25, and that we've provided 15 secure spots and 2 visitor spots. So you can see it's a little bit subpar of what it would actually need, but we think we can accommodate that considering the limited amount of parking that we have today. One of the big questions that comes up with this design option, though, is we've eliminated a substantial amount of parking in doing this. So we have to start to think of how do we accommodate that? Does it move forward with the parking structure that's proposed? Do we look at another parking structure out on Laguna Canyon Road? But when you remove the amount of parking spaces that you have here, which off the top of my head is about 30 spaces, you have to contend with where that's going to go. So that's the first option. You can see the price range that goes along with this between 24 million and 27 million to produce a design solution like this.
And council, do you think it would be better to ask questions on each one as they go? What do you guys think? You want to do that? So who wants to ask questions on this? No.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So Charlie Wood, so we said on a previous slide that we have a deficit for the fire department in terms of space.
Mhm.
So would a new fire station alleviate some of that space
It
requirement?
would.
How much of it do you think?
I think today we've proposed 11. I feel like we're at 9. Is that right?
Today, we're at 9,500 between fire admin and station 1. So this brings us, 2,000 square feet.
To the
Close the
11.
gap.
Can you speak in the microphone?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're about 9,500 square feet total existing between fire admin and station 1 today. And this would bring us, closer to that 11,500. It's hard to see the number, but
Okay.
2,000 square feet of the 10, that's the gap.
Okay. And so the idea was we would repurpose the fire station over here for space for the staff.
Correct. We've looked at a couple different options when you start to factor in what could happen at City Hall. There's been options here that talk about moving some of perhaps the city manager's office over there, maybe opening up the second floor to a community room. Lots of different options have been explored there. There's also the opportunity for police to take advantage of some of that if that was the preferred option.
Okay, thanks, Charlie.
So I have a couple, I don't know if they're questions or as much as comments, but the comment is, to me, this seems to be if you're going to do this over in that lot, it seems to be a real underutilization of that space. I understand what you're saying about the pull through and trying to create that, but it just is a lot of space that's devoted to that. And I don't know why we continue to have as much parking there. I mean, if you're going to have to solve parking anyway, should you be minimizing that? A bigger picture concern I have is addressing the police department. And I wondered if there was any thought given to a joint facility for police fire over in this location. But I guess I need to understand more about the police short-term solutions. I think the absence of an EOC is a big problem for me. And we've got it currently down at the CRC. If you're looking at repurposing the CRC for other things, we've got to have an EOC. And I don't know whether staff has looked at, whether they think this location is better for an EOC as opposed to, further down the highway. But the absence of an EOC for me would be a big concern here.
I'll respond to a few of those comments. I appreciate the perception that there's a lot of unused space here. We could look to probably tighten up a little bit of the circulation, but the size of the fire apparatus that they have these days and are moving towards are pretty large, and they require, from an OCFA perspective, you just look at their requirements, which a city typically adopts, those turnarounds for a drive-through like this are pretty broad. We also have the parking that we have to accommodate. I think we could tighten this up a little bit and maybe pull that trash enclosure towards the building a little bit, maybe pick up a couple spots. But I think the circulation is what's really driving that. If we were trying to eliminate that, we'd have to really consider the back end solution. And then I think you'd probably be looking at something more comprehensive at the intersection of Forest and Ocean Avenue to broaden that up and allow some sort of back end situation. Or a turntable is another option that we've considered in the apparatus bay that we didn't show here just from a cost perspective. The EOC, you could do 3,000 square feet as a third level. There's always the subterranean option that gets pretty cost prohibitive pretty quickly. We looked at that at the community center, Suzy Q. One of the reasons it is what it is today with that one-story parking, it was just so prohibitive to do that. And then you've got the concern around mass and scale at that point. If you've got a concern about mass and scale as it relates to the existing city hall. And we do have other options for the EOC down at the recreation center. You could also reconsider doing something here that would introduce a pretty significant seismic retrofit to accommodate that. And then lastly, to your question about the shared use between police and fire, we did not explore that on this particular facility. What we've explored so far is renovations to the city hall to take advantage of more of the second story, or perhaps a separate building for police behind city hall. And you can see those options in the myriad of design options that are supporting these presentations today.
Is there a way in which you could have the like the admin and the support area kind of have it be able to be converted into an EOC? Like perhaps there would be offices that could be, turned into the EOC, or is there a reason why you wouldn't want to do that? That's the first question. Second question that's sort of related to all this is, so if somebody said, we don't want to have it here, would the alternative would just be the existing location and there you have the space constraints, or I guess answer like the sort of the question of why move the fire station at all?
I'll start with the why move the fire station at all. First and foremost, this existing facility doesn't meet current seismic requirements. And to retrofit this to accommodate that, I think you'd really be challenging what is I'll consider a historic resource in town. And I don't think you'd be pleased with what comes of it because of that. There's also just a lack of space for the fire apparatuses that are needed. The vehicles are getting larger. They have more requirements to support them when they're parked. So providing a more abundant space for that was what drove us to select this spot. I think the obvious choice for the EOC does lend itself towards the recreation center that's there today. However, I do think this becomes an option next door to us if it were to be abandoned. Again, some seismic retrofit, but maybe not as much. And then we have combined facilities in some of our projects. Buena Park Police Department specifically, they have a community room that is used intermittently. And then in the event of an emergency, they convert it into a center. That works there because both spaces are somewhat intermittent uses. But to have something like an office space that converts into an EOC, I see that less viable because of the continuous use of something like office space.
Well, we use it, our EOC, where it is now, above, it's in the cafeteria. So we've opened that many times, and it's an awkward situation. And, you're already worried about addressing the emergency, and you're get caught up in trying to get that thing operational. So I don't think that's a great option for us, because we've opened it a number of times in the last few years for fire and rain and other stuff. So I think a dedicated EOC is necessary here. But the other question I had is, sorry, is, of course, we back the fire truck in here. That's not ideal. It works. I mean, so we're space constrained over here too. I guess we could back it in if we're worried about, I mean, I am worried about the space over there. But it's even more awkward because you have, like people coming off Laguna Canyon Road and going out to Laguna Canyon Road.
It definitely gets tighter in that area. And I think an important thing to also note here, the implementation is operational continuity. If you're going to take down the fire station in its existing location and rebuild there, where are you going to put Fire Station 1 temporarily? So something they have to consider in all of these plans that we've tried to integrate into solutions.
So if I may, I just wanted to point out, being a part of the subcommittee, so as we evaluated all of these options, obviously there's a lot of possibilities. And Bob and Sue, both, I shared both of your concerns as far as specifically right on the mark, Bob, every point you just brought up. But at the end of the day, I guess this is just to start a conversation, and that will eventually allow us to prioritize to where we can really start to think about these much more thoroughly. And I know that some of this seems a bit jarring, especially the numbers, but I think when we get into and can expand and be more comprehensive when we conduct needs assessments. In my view, our needs assessments, I mean, we had all of these 26 facilities, and you only wanted to spend so much time really kind of digging in. So I think once we kind of establish some priorities, and then we could dig in a lot deeper and really think about needs assessments. And I do think that we're going to have to look at some things that are like we're talking about, what should we back into this space, or do we need the big turnaround? And are there an opportunity to merge some of the police department functions into a common facility, or can the police department functions move into the existing fire station over here? So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. I think that it's obvious to everybody, but I just thought I'd throw it out there just to remind everybody that there's a big conversation ahead of us once we start to narrow this down.
Okay. Holly?
Appreciate that comment. One thing as you look at all these aren't designs. You've got to think of these as test fits.
Yeah.
Opportunity diagrams. Does something of this nature fit here? So I think it proves that a fire station can fit here. Is there a better orientation of the drive aisle? Do we need that? Those are all questions that you can answer as you finalize a design.
Good. Okay. Any other
I'm
questions?
getting too much into the weeds here, so apologies. But if we're looking at reusing what is currently Fire Station 1, if I understand you correctly, the seismic requirements to make that building, functional and safe are going to be very different for a renovated fire station versus office space versus an EOC. All three of those kind of have different requirements and categories.
That's correct. The EOC and the fire station share the same requirements. Their essential facility essentially have to increase the structural components by 1.5 times what you would do for an office space. But office space does not have those requirements. So that's what makes utilizing Fire Station 1 for office space a really logical solution.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's move on to the next one. Thank you.
Yep. All right. This one's rather short and succinct. This is the existing Festival of Arts grounds. You can see the existing facilities that are here. And all we're proposing in this area, taking advantage of the fact that one of the things we heard most in our community feedback was more performance space. And right now, the Forum Theater gets underutilized because of accessibility issues. So trying to keep a modestly minded budget in mind as we were going through this, we proposed that a new vertical circulation element be provided on what I'll call the right-hand side of this diagram for providing access to the Forum Theater, and then bridging the space between the Forum Theater and the existing Irvine Bowl back of house, another vertical circulation element there that would connect those two. Rather straightforward. It only adds, a couple thousand square feet of additional space to it. And it's all about accessibility. And the price range for those is about $3 to $4 million.
Any questions on this?
What exactly is a vertical circulation element?
Improving elevators, ramps, and stairways.
Mhm.
Yep.
Other questions on this one?
Yeah, I have a question. So, there's other things wrong with the Forum Theater also.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, and I don't know, maybe Bob knows more about this than I do, but so the Playhouse, did you guys look at the Playhouse utilization too? Because
We did.
we have a lot of dark months at the Playhouse.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it would make more sense to put money into the Playhouse and make it more of a performance center versus a Playhouse, because
Yeah.
I just feel like that's a resource that's underutilized, and it has an impact on the local economy here when that thing is dark.
Yep.
So anyway, just.
I agree.
some of my thoughts.
I also think from a funding perspective, we need to work out some sort of an agreement with the festival, but I think that's a longer term discussion, but I agree with you, Sue. Any other questions on this one?
Briefly,
Okay.
so Sue, good point. Alex, good point. And I think that now, there's been, we just went through the tourist marketing district renewal, and there's been some discussion regarding the art organization kind of coming up with an evaluation, or let's call it a multi-year strategic plan, hopefully somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 years. I have talked to several of the folks involved with the art organizations regarding this exercise specifically, and I did assure them that this is just a very preliminary kind of to generate ideas and concepts. But at the end of the day, where I'm headed with this is, I think timing is perfect. We have, the art organizations that are thinking now about their future. I had an interesting conversation on Saturday with Joe Hanauer regarding what you were just talking about, the stage and the use at the Playhouse, and I believe that they're making some progress over there to actually achieve a higher level of utilization. So and then I think that there might be some opportunity. We look at some of these numbers, and there's an automatic assumption that the city hall has to come in and fund all this. But I think that there might be an opportunity for some of these organizations, if they come up with some interesting programming, to really, embark on some great fundraising opportunities, depending on what their plans are. So I think it's all exciting right now.
Good. Okay. Any other questions? No. Okay. Let's move on to the next. Or I think you have one more slide on this.
I'll just make a comment about the Playhouse. We did study that. There are options that provide some additional, what I'll call rehearsal space, which I think aligns with the aspirations you were speaking of.
Good.
All right. Moving on from the Festival of Arts to the library. The library, where all the other options, we're looking at just one. The library, we're actually going to show you two alternatives today. The first one is taking advantage of the existing funds that come along with the transition from county back into the city's hands. We do a lot of libraries, Griffin and LPA together, and we know that in this $4 to $5 million range, which is the current amount of funds that are available from the county, there's very limited amounts of things that you can do there. So when you're thinking around that kind of cost range, we got to be thinking about improving finishes, reorganizing stacks, very limited improvement. So that's the first option that we're going to see. How did you want to add?
Yeah, just infrastructure.
Infrastructure. And then and when he says infrastructure, repairing mechanical systems, et cetera, that may be in disrepair. And then the second option, we're going to take a look at how we might expand within the footprint of the structure that's there today, honoring the building and the architecture that was set forth, but just taking advantage of some space to add more square footage and bring some more function to the space. So we'll start with the first one, which is the $4 million, the $7 to $8 million is what these alternatives range in. So you can see here today, the existing square footage is about 11,000 square feet. And to meet the programmatic requirements that the library has asked for, we'd like to get that up to 5,000. So this, again, working with what's there, we stay at that 11,000, so it would be short of square footage. In this instance, we would retain the existing lower level functions. You see the Friends of the Library in orange, and then what we label in green as staff. That could continue to be the Chamber of Commerce if that's desired, but if not, it could also go back to staff. So it's an idea of perhaps reorganizing some of the space. As we move upstairs, the biggest gesture we make with this is introducing a teen center. This is the idea of taking existing space, perhaps relocating what I'll call the heritage collection that we have over there, giving it a new home and opening that up for teens, connecting that to the adult area that's near the entry, trying to offer the staff some minor improvements within their space, but staying within the amount of square feet that they have, improving the restroom layout, bringing some more accessibility, children's area would stay where it is today that we're all accustomed with. And then the second big move would be taking what the library calls program space. Some of us call it the community room or the shared conference room, bringing more prominence to that in this particular example, and then dealing with some of the items, the mechanical systems, et cetera, that are in disrepair. But this would be mostly interior focused, finishes, and those external equipment pieces that need attention there. All right, so we'll go through option B, which is increasing, and we can ask some questions. So here, what we're proposing is there's an area right outside of the Friends of the Library and the Chamber of Commerce. Has a large planter. There is a significant tree there, which is one of the maybe challenges that we'd have to contend with. However, but you can see here, we add about 800 square feet down there, and that's moving us towards the about 15,000 square feet that the library aspired to achieve. We could still continue to have staff down here, Friends of the Library, the Chamber of Commerce could still operate here, and we keep the trash enclosure and mechanical where they are today. Upstairs, we'd make some of those big moves that we talked about in the previous example of bringing a teen center to the space, improving the library's program area. But this one, we actually took an opportunity to rethink how we might move some of the space around. The children's area is probably one of the more frequently used parts of the building. Moving that to that more prominent corner where they could have that beautiful view down into the beach was a consideration we've had here. Attaching that to the adults area so that families can have a closer connection, really focusing on the entry in the marketplace. We're seeing what the library is doing with the Library of Things and giving them an opportunity to display those in a better way. Also then expanding in that courtyard deck that's outside of the existing footprint. It's a purple line, a dotted line that represents the existing footprint, taking advantage of some expansion space there for the adult and a study center so that we could kind of start to present through the entryway and a study or collaborative area up onto the street what's going on to the library, kind of present that to the street, make a little bit stronger connection there. And then we'd be moving the teen area where the children's the children's area is today. So you can see all together that gets us right there at the additional 15,000 square feet, brings some new restroom space and makes the staff area a lot more efficient than it is today. As I've envisioned this today, I think it's honoring what's there, understanding and probably trying to restore some of the original architecture. I know some of the amazing skylights were taken out. The paint really doesn't do the building the original justice it was there. I know there's some passion about the front doors. Taking moments like that at this estimated budget that you have here between 20 to 25 to 22 million to rectify some of those issues as well.
Questions on the library?
Is there anything that can be done with the parking? The parking's terrible there.
Mhm. None of the design options that we've here have changed the parking. So we're not making the parking worse, but none of these offer a better solution to what's there.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering if there's a way that's so dark and dank there, and I don't think all the best things go on under there at night.
Yeah,
So, I don't know, I was looking for a way to
yeah.
kind of
Those
improve that
are,
area.
again, go back to the idea that these are test fits.
Yeah,
And as we get into actually designing this library, those could be one of the programmatic requirements that you put into the design.
Any other questions, Sue? Bob, do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question, but a comment on the parking. One of the notes I had here was, you know, I think under our DSP, you can provide off-site parking. It seems to me the parking here is really, I don't know what the minimum is you need. I'm sure you need some ADA parking and a few other spaces, but a lot of it, I would be saying, why not shift it up the street and put that
Yes.
third level on, partial
Glenary.
third level on Glenary
Yeah.
and build this site out for building.
Mm.
That's what I would do.
Yeah, I think
point.
that's a theme that you see in a lot of these design options. Ultimately, to build something really impactful, you end up taking parking away. So as we have this conversation today, I think you have to put at the forefront of where does parking go to solve that? You've offered
Good
at least
question.
one solution
Yeah.
today.
Good. Other questions on this? Okay, good.
All right, moving on to the Community Recreation Center. This is the site as it exists today. You can see we've identified some of the functions that are there just to orientate us. One of the things that we've heard pretty loud and clear through this process is that people are really, the biggest value they're getting out of the use of this site is the recreation and gym. That actually has a stage in it as well, which is another big element that we hear a lot. So while we looked at a variety of different options that have removed everything that's there and started anew, tried to repurpose what is there for new functions like we're doing today, we've actually come up with a hybrid solution that we're going to show you here. One of the things that we've also heard through working with Mayor Ranaghi and Mayor Pro Tem Orgill is the fact that some of these projects need to be funded in some way. And we see an opportunity perhaps here to suggest a residential option in hybrid with the gym that may provide that solution. So when we look at this first, what we're proposing here is keeping, excuse me, excuse me, the, pardon me, keeping the existing field, thank you so much, keeping the existing field and using that level that the field exists today as a parking a lot there, a lower level. So it would remain on its current elevation. We could provide parking for about 70 stalls there. And then as we move upward, the idea is to put a deck over the top of that parking layer, provide a field. We have looked at options that could provide pools here as well, but we went with the more cost-effective solution and provided a play field above that parking structure. And then we've left the existing gym, and then we've added the square footage here that in yellow that you see for residential. So we've designed it right now in a way that it could perhaps leverage the existing footprints that's there of the building and build onto that, right? Nothing more sustainable than using what you have. But there's also the idea that some of those buildings could be removed and this could be built as you see it, kind of this footprint here to kind of maximize the amount of square footage that you have. So at residential, it gives us about 35,000 square feet of opportunity there. We've talked about the idea that in this solution, the city might go through the process of what I'll call entitling that area that sets the heights limits, the density of the area, and then turns that over to a developer kind of pre-entitled to design something within the parameters that have come there and leaving behind the field and the gym for the city use. And those, that's the CRC option. So open that up for any questions. Section. Oh,
This is
thank you.
something that I think deserves a broad conversation. I'm not sure about combining the existing gym with the housing. I see the rationale behind it. I think that it would be worth at least having a discussion about, well, what if we bring Lang Park into this mix? You know, we have that gym, and I brought it up several times that currently exists at Lang Park. It seems like it's underutilized, and it seems like it could be rebuilt to accommodate more. We talk about a swimming pool.
Okay.
I just think we need to get our arms around this whole project. And if this is a funding opportunity, what would this site look like if it was maximized with housing? If there's an opportunity for a private developer, I don't want to overcomplicate things. I think we could have some quick, some relatively expedited conversations. I would even be willing to, think about, is there an opportunity with the NCC property? Are there exchanges, acquisitions, moving things around? So for instance, if this property had a certain number of market rate and a certain number of affordable units, I talked to Morris a little bit, and we did a quick little study to see how many units. You'd be surprised how many housing units could go on this.
Oh, yeah.
Which means that there's property tax for the city, right? Which is a big plus too. But anyway, I just think that this deserves a conversation at some point, sooner rather than later. Regardless of what direction we do, I just think it would be good for the council to flush it out.
This option does show a very modest housing solution. Behind this is a hillside protection zone. We've tried to respect that, but being the city, I suspect you could make some modifications to that. And we've shown some design options that are in the package available to you that show upwards of hundreds of units in this area.
Charlie, do you have any idea what the value of that property is?
I couldn't speak to that.
With entitlements, I think it's really valuable. Okay, other questions on this? And we can get in a robust conversation after public comment. No more questions? Okay, good, thank you.
I will add, I'm sorry, Mayor, just for clarity, one section here so you can understand a little bit more clearly when I was speaking of the parking lot at the lower level and the upper level deck with a field. All right, this will be the last item, the last property in the evaluation. This is Lang Park. Again, Group 1 was trying to provide a modestly priced solution that was within the realm of possibility of what the city could do. I think there is a lot of potential with Lang Park, especially when you bring in a revenue generating option like the CRC could provide. There's some really amazing opportunities that could really connect to South Laguna and provide some much needed resources and amenities down in that area. But what we're looking at here is one of the most significant concerns that we've heard about Lang Park today is the pickleball courts and their proximity to the residential option. So what we wanted to show here was what we're calling a very light option of how to address Lang Park. And all of this diagram really demonstrates is the idea that a T-ball field, which is the way we use the property today, a small U8 soccer field, which is an opposite season of T-ball, both fit here. An option to move the pickleball to the opposite side of Wesley and then relocating the play structures. You could interchange these things and perhaps maybe put the play structure between the soccer field and baseball field, T-ball field. But this is just the idea that there is a quick way to relocate, quick but not easy, not inexpensive way to relocate the pickleball courts over there. And this one I hesitate to talk about without talking about the missed opportunity that goes along with doing this property, right? This is not an insignificant investment at $12 to $13 million. I'd rather personally see that money go towards something a little bit more substantive here, but it does prove out that the functions can fit by relocating them throughout the site.
Okay, other questions on this?
Mr. Mayor, I know everybody who lives around this area and sees it, especially in the summertime. I think there's an incredible parking opportunity there
Agreed.
to do something beneath
True.
Lang Park, just because that area is so impacted. And I think you could structure the parking so that it is public parking throughout, June, July, August, and weekends, and then use it for city activities the rest of the time.
Absolutely. If you look into some of the other design options that are the non-light version, I'll call it, you'll see extensive subterranean parking there that could even go further if you wanted to and probably expand the number of stalls there. It is raised above Pacific Coast Highway, so you're not as challenged with some of the subterranean issues that you would be here in the downtown.
Because this one doesn't really, it's basically a $12 million solution to the noise issue with pickleball, right? Where maybe paddles or new technology with pickleball could achieve that very much more cost effective way. Anyway, okay. Good. I agree with both the city manager and that analysis. So anyway, any other questions on Lang Park? No?
Okay. So as we wrap up, the next steps are focused on turning this framework into action. We'll incorporate your feedback today. And from there, staff can begin aligning the highest priority projects with funding strategies, prepared to move into implementation, starting with scopes, design, and early planning for those projects that are most ready. And of course, a continued conversation with the community where applicable on these projects. So to help guide these steps, we've kind of identified a few conversation starters. Certainly don't have to discuss all these today, but could help the conversation. Number one, if Fire Station 1 moves sites, how should we handle the potential loss of parking? We kind of touched on that a little bit in our conversation so far. Number two, should housing be included in the CRC project? And if so, where do displaced services go? Three, if limited library funds, what should be prioritized, basic upgrades or more impactful changes? Four, should the Forum Theater improvements go beyond ADA compliance or look at other options there, such as the Playhouse? And then five, what's that vision for Lang Park? a small renovation, or a state-of-the-art recreation center. So with that, that concludes our presentation. Happy to answer any more questions.
Does council have any more questions, or I think we should open public comment on this item because we have till 4:30, right? Okay, so I want to make sure we have a lot of time for council discussion. So let's 3 minutes each. If you'd like to provide public comment, now is your time to do so.
Morris Skandarian. I've been working with the Forum Theater to help with the rehab and the ADA upgrades. So my curiosity is, I think Sue brought in the Playhouse as an alternative. If that's the case, what would happen to the Forum Theater? Because there's a lot of music, Cultural Center is interested in reviving that and taking their events there because they need more seating and it's getting more popular all the time. So ADA upgrades to the front, which also gives you access to the upper level dining area of the Terra restaurant. And then there's some stage remodeling that needs to occur with some bathrooms and so forth. So it's not just ADA. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Whatever. I'm Mike Sadler, born and raised here. Kind of commenting to the facility at the CRC, and just wanted to make sure that with the test bits that you've initially provided, that we're hopefully can be involved in it a little more, just to get the idea of moving forward. I know these are just test bits. You've mentioned that a few times, but just having our own comments.
Closer.
Closer?
Go closer to the mic.
Oh, sorry.
No, you have
Hello?
to move it up a little bit and you're good. Good.
Do you really need this?
Perfect.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, really everyone in our little community, since we're attached to the CRC, has a lot of different ideas, you know, what they'd like to see, what they don't want to see. One of them was obviously the raised parking with the facility on top, because that's going to block views right off the bat. There's been other comments as well with the facility being more of a, maybe like a larger condominium complex or whatever it might be. We're focused on minimizing the traffic, and that's what we need to be focusing on because we've been living there for a long time. And whatever the case is, we know something's happening and it's going to happen, and we're not totally adverse to that. We just need to make sure that we find some happy medium to living harmoniously in that area. That's all.
Thanks, Mike.
Hi, Mary Locatelli. I just have a couple of comments, and this is just confusion on my part, but I thought I heard early on there was a $400 million number for capital improvements, and then a $300 million number related to repairs and maintenance over 20 years. And I don't know how those two are related and whether they're additive or they're somehow, you mix those together. So if somebody could answer that for me, I'd appreciate it. Secondly, someone mentioned, is there another option for the fire station? I would just second that if we've thought of other options, perhaps for the fire station. And the last point I would make is this wouldn't affect me unless we can find some pretty significant reverse aging technology, but I would like to support the teen center at the library. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Gary Kasich. Just a couple quick points, and you hit on some of them. One, I'll remind again on opportunities to leverage with the school district. They have 2 fully functional gyms at the high school. I'm not sure they're being utilized as much, and you've got a little bit more of a willingness, I think, with the current regime to talk about that. Secondly, I understand the city is constrained on space, but I really think on key facilities, you should know the answer to Councilmember Kempf's question. You know, what is the value of certain properties worth? It's just like if you had your own home. What's it worth to me? What's it going to cost me to remodel it? What could I do with those funds if they were available to me? So just having that as part of your decision-making process certainly makes sense. And that would say to CRC, probably the jewel of what you have from a value standpoint. And I didn't hear it mentioned, but if Ruby's is still on the market, that makes that property incredibly valuable, including the piece that you own today. So a lot of dollars knocking around there, depending upon what you'd like to do with it. That's it. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Other testimony on this item? Now is your last chance to do so. Okay, so we're going to close public comment on this item, bring it back to council, and I think those so let me start with the questions that Mary Locatelli asked. So can you explain the maintenance versus new build? Is that basically, is the maintenance assumption based on not doing any new construction?
Yeah, maintenance is operating in your existing conditions.
Okay.
Versus if you do new construction, the cost for maintaining those facilities kind of resets. So it'd be case by case, project by project implementation.
And remind us what the number is between if we just do maintenance versus the new build?
Well, the maintenance number is 314 million, but the new construction or renovation options vary greatly by
what we
or
do.
option, but it's kind of like 440 million. It's
Got
kind
it.
of like a grand scheme idea.
And then I think the fire, so why don't we, her question about the fire station, I want to kind of, let's hold on that until we get to the discussion, the bullet point discussions, and kind of talk about that in the context of those. So let's bring up those bullet points again. So I think council, unless there's an objection, I think let's just take each of these and sort of provide all the feedback that we can provide to make it really an actionable session, and kind of talk through each of these, with the questions provided here, but kind of going beyond to the extent that council members have other feedback. So why don't we start with the fire station? I think the first question is, do we, based on the testimony that's been provided, is there anyone who thinks that we should try to use the existing space to retrofit the existing fire station?
I don't.
I don't. I think it's critical that we preserve that structure. I think it's such an important building in Laguna, but I don't think it's financially responsible for us to try to retrofit it for a fire station.
That thing's been remodeled a number of times and it doesn't ever really get much better. And it's not safe because the fire department, there's no back end doors. So you don't have the airflow. So they have this rinky dink, vent that they put outside when they have to do any work. It's not a good place to work, actually.
Bob?
Yeah, no, I think it's critical that we relocate and build a new fire station, number one. I'm not going to get into the details of that location over there. I'm okay with it if that is the highest and best use of that site. And I want it to be efficiently used, but we need to build a new fire station, number one.
So then I think that's the next question is, should we, as I recall, and I don't remember, the direction that the council gave when we had this before was to look at the standards of coverage and look at what is the space that makes the most sense for Fire Station 1, right? And were there other options considered that could achieve that goal of our standards of coverage beyond this space? That's a city-owned asset. Oh, and Mark, you missed the first part where the question was just whether we thought there should be, the current location for Fire Station 1 doesn't work. I'd assume your answer to that would be it doesn't work. Right. So then now the question is there another space that would work to achieve the standards of coverage goals for a new fire station? And Gavin, do you want to answer that?
So I can start, and then I'm sure Charlie can chime in if there's something I missed. But we did look at the standards of cover. That seemed like one of the better locations based on response times, the turnaround, and what the fire department actually needed out of a Fire Station 1. Charlie reminded me we did look at, and I'll say, the Christmas tree lot as an option. It just didn't seem to work with the facility that the fire department needed. And the turnaround, it was an issue at that particular location. And there were some other spots that were not city-owned properties, so we just focused on city-owned properties that we could put the facility on, because obviously if you want to go outside of city-owned facilities, the cost to purchase that property would be a little, obviously add to the cost of the overall station.
Okay. Bob, did you?
Well, I think we should, we don't want to get into too much detail. It sounds like there's probably consensus on having more work being done on that location for Fire Station 1, right? But there's a lot of work to be done.
So I think where we want, what we should probably get is all that, what we've already done, right? And then look at, are there other options? Because I think I agree with Bob to the extent that we don't want to make, it's a very long-term decision here that we want to, pick the right location. Perhaps even buying a non-city owned property could be a better. So I think that is a good idea, that we should kind of exhaust all alternatives before we move forward. Is there consensus there?
Yeah, I mean, like North Laguna doesn't have a fire station. And, there's some big vacant lots up there that we could maybe think about purchasing or something like that.
Yeah, as I recall, one of the issues with that is that we have to beat the canyon is one of the vulnerabilities that the standards of coverage identified. But yeah, I agree. So I would be open. I think we should, look at all options for where the best place, if we were to start the city over again, for Fire Station 1 should be, and go from there. And then if there's nowhere else that's better, then I don't think that this is an unviable location. This could be a location that works. What does the rest of the council think?
I agree with that. I definitely would like to look more at the Christmas tree lot. I think that could be a good option. I want to understand a little bit more why.
Why it's not good?
Yeah,
If it's not good, why that's the case?
Correct.
I would
what
agree with
the
that.
turnaround issues are there as opposed to the turnaround issues we're seeing here. And I think most importantly, starting with that question, where do we want to locate Fire Station 1? What is the area in which we want to locate it? And doing an analysis of not only city-owned properties, but I think it's important to look at privately owned properties as well and really have an idea of what the total cost of either option would be.
So I think, and this is a question for Dave. So what I want to make sure that we're doing is we're going in a way that where we're moving forward, we're not in sort of a paralysis situation. So Dave, what would be your recommendation about how we could effectuate this? Because I think, my goal, and I think this is probably the council's goal, is that we need to have a new Fire Station 1. And so then the question is, how do we get there and how do we do all of our due diligence? Dave, do you have a recommendation about maybe perhaps with a timeline of when that analysis could come back to us, or on how we move forward with respect to Fire Station 1?
Yeah, I think we can turn that around pretty quickly. And I'd look at what the most impactful is in terms of the standards of cover, which to me means a circle around the village entrance and towards the Christmas tree lot and that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And see what's available, what could be combined into one essential services building. And then we can come back to you fairly quickly, I think. We should talk it near the end of our conversation about what comes next and what we want to deliver when. And this would be part of the first part of the delivery.
I agree.
Okay.
And then I think that it sounds like there's sort of a consensus that to the extent that we can incorporate, like a CR or a, EOS, like any other additional facilities that we can incorporate, we'd want to incorporate it.
I think we absolutely have to be hyper efficient with our space.
Yeah.
So if that means, combined EOC facility, I think that's a great idea. And I think it's worth it for us to invest in creating an EOC in a new building that is going to meet all those seismic standards and that's going to withstand a lot.
Okay, so why don't we, I think the first step is we need to find the location, and then that way we can come back to the council and the council will be able to look at and say, okay, this is the most viable option, and that allows us to make decisions that way. And then if not, then we can go on a different path. But I think does anyone disagree with that?
Yeah, I think when we work our way through this, it's important, and this isn't obvious, I think, why most of us are thinking that we're not really that excited about putting the fire station next door to us. I think that, but we do need to ask ourselves why. And the reason when you do this, it's important is because it helps you get past status quo kind of thinking with these kinds of decisions. People get very emotional and attached when they talk about, remodeling and rebuilding and things. So I think we all probably would say, well, we don't want to use that valuable space next to City Hall for this big turnaround, cumbersome structure. So, but as we work our way through this, I just think it's important that we always ask ourselves why. And I think that will help us make bigger decisions. And I know this is going to run across next door like wildfire, but you could say, well, what if we put the fire station where the library is and the library moved over here? I don't think we should be afraid to think, about big ideas or, and just be prepared for it, at least just as ideas.
But I think we also have to be in a very practical perspective here. And I do think that we want to frame this whole facility master planning around, public safety. And so I guess, let's figure out a timeline. And do you have an idea, David, what that timeline could be now of when you could, because I imagine we already have the analysis from looking at other opportunities.
I want to defer to you guys rather than my promising.
Because what I don't want to be is where we're in this analysis paralysis thing where we can never make any decision and provide any feedback and provide a meaningful plan, which is, I think, kind of the problem of what we've done a lot in this town is where we don't really make any decisions ever. And it's a hard decision to make. There's not a good place.
So what I would probably suggest is we're going to hear all the council comments tonight and suggestions and recommendations, and then we come back at the very next meeting and I'm going to lay out all the things, the timeline, when we expect to get the information, so the council is very clear and the community is very clear when we'll get these results. Because you're right, on the fire station, we have some information, but some may take a little more time. But if you give us a little bit of time
Okay, then
to
you
put
can-
that together,
Okay.
I'll have it for the
I think
next
that-
meeting.
That's going to shape a lot of the other conversations. So I think,
Yes.
anyway, go ahead.
No, I would just say one thing about this area over here. Charlie, what do you guys think about? I mean, my personal view is we take up a lot of surface area with parking. We have a lot of surface area parking, which if we didn't do that, if we put it back up against a hillside or something, we'd have a lot more room because we're so space constrained here because we're on top of each other and we don't have much
Yeah.
room. But it never has made any sense to me that we have all that surface parking out there when we have so many other needs. So anyway.
I agree with you, Sue. I think that's why ultimately the fires, I think that is going to be I don't think there is going to be a better space. That's just my prediction, but I might be wrong. And then I think then it becomes a question of, how do we address the lost parking? I think we need to have some sort of a parking structure that more efficiently utilizes that space and allows us for us to meet our fire station needs, among other things.
Well, and one of the design, I don't know how many, umpteen designs of a potential parking lot back there, parking structure back there. There was one, remember, we were, talking about 6,000, 7,000 square feet for possibly the Surf Heritage Museum. So if you do a parking structure, I mean, EOC would fit in there, other things would fit in there. So it's not just parking. So I think it is probably, I think you're exactly right, Mayor. I think it's probably a combination of the two.
I also, sorry, just want to add that I don't necessarily have a problem with that location. I really want to challenge you folks and ourselves to be as creative as we possibly can with the limited amount of space we have. And that means a lot of compromise, right? That means that, we want to give our public safety folks the space and the tools that they need, but it might be a little smaller than they would ideally want. And we're going to have to sacrifice some things too. I think it's really important that we be creative and we all be willing to compromise.
Yeah. So if what I'm hearing from council is that as soon as possible, we want to basically look at how, we all agree that Fire Station 1 cannot be where it is. So then the question is, how do we meet our standards of cover in the best possible way and find the best location? So what we want from staff is some research and analysis on other alternatives, including the Christmas tree lot, and telling us why those are not good ideas, or perhaps they are. And that way we can come back and say conclusively, look, the village entrance is the best place for the fire station. And then that allows us to go and think about what Bob was talking about, what Sue was talking about as relates to the parking structure and all that. Is that a fair characterization? Good. Okay. So Fire Station 1, any other feedback that we need to provide here? Okay. Good. So then let's do library before we get to CRC housing. I think library was next on the list. What does council think about, so the question here is what should be prioritized with the $4.2 million budget? But I think the first question is sort of, do we want to just keep the library, I like the way it was framed in this. Do we want to have preserving the existing service delivery, or do we want to look at the more aspirational, multi-generational approach that was outlined here?
Can I add some framing to this too? I've let Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Orgill know this yesterday, that the county library system is pressuring us to start allocating that 4.2 million a little bit earlier than I would prefer. I think we can have a conversation with them about them and maybe push back respectfully. But at the same time, Councilmember Orgill is also having a conversation with the school district to talk about what kind of partnership could be leveraged to increase the teen access and youth access to the library.
Yep.
So all this is happening fairly quickly, maybe not quickly enough for a decision. And I guess where my brain goes to is you should try to be more aspirational than basic on this one, because I think there's some good opportunities to leverage other dollars. Will it be in time? I don't know.
Yeah,
But
I agree with that.
Yeah.
So Mark, is there, so if we spend the 4.2 million, and we decide to do something else with the school district down the road, are we throwing away a significant amount of that money? Okay.
Well, I think we need to before we think about the 4.2 million, let's just step back. What do we want at that library? And, when you talk to all the kids at the high school, including when I went there, that library is not used by the high school students. They all go to, the library that Dave built in Newport Beach. And so, when you hear the testimony from what staff conveyed about the library staff and what they're looking for. I mean, I just don't think this library really meets our needs. So I think the aspirational approach is a really good compromise in a way, right? Because I think it actually achieves a lot of the cool, the historical features of that library, while in a very constructive and smart way adds to it. And, perhaps we could even look into what Bob was describing about, have adding the more parking at Glen structure and being able to take even more space. But I think what would be helpful in terms of input to staff from council is, do we want to just do the sort of basic, keep everything the same, no net gain in square footage, or do we want the aspirational approach? And so I'd be in favor of the aspirational approach. And I want to hear what my colleagues up here think.
I have a deep fondness for the historicity of that building. So I guess my question for you, Charlie, would be, if I remember correctly in your presentation, the more aspirational approach would allow us to be a little bit more historically accurate and restore some of the historical aspects of the building. Whereas if we just kept the existing footprint and freshened it up, we lose the opportunity to do a real historic restoration on that building.
Yes, you understood that correctly.
Okay, thank you.
My comment on this would be, if it's going to be aspirational, which we all like to be aspirational, why not, right? I love the idea that Mayor Pro Tem Orgo is pursuing other funding. And it was, I know we're going to talk about it in a little bit here on the CRC, but when you look at funding models, and I point to Newport in particular, with respect to the Whitty Library.
Yeah.
The city said, we'll do 50. Community, you come up with 50.
I agree with that.
And they're looking at a pool complex down in Lower Castaways, and it was the same thing. City said, we'll do 50, you do 50, community. We're, whether it's the school district or, the other thing, I think it's interesting the county's pressing us on the 4.2, but when you look at what the county has invested in other new library facilities around here, we should be back, I think, also to the county saying, this isn't enough. If you're looking at your entire system and what you've invested in other facilities, other library facilities, both nearby here and further away in the county, we're not getting our fair share here. So I'm okay with the aspirational, but it ought to be other people's money.
I agree. And I think that there should be, so I'd be supportive of moving forward with the aspirational one, with the idea of, exploring other funding opportunities like the teen center, which I visited the teen center that's currently at Lang Park. And the problem with that is that it's just, the kids can't walk there. So this is the ideal location to achieve that, which is something that's been actually pursued for a long time. So I like that. I like the idea of the school district putting in money. And to Bob's point, I think we should have a conversation about, a lot of people have said that we should consider looking at pulling out of the county library system, because we are a donor city. And, perhaps, that could be an opportunity to get more money to achieve these, but also just to have more, more flexibility in how we do our programming. So, and I also think we have generous people in this town who can be part of some sort of a public-private partnership that could help fund really a truly world-class facility that the town could be proud of. So I would agree with, the idea of the aspirational approach with, pursuing other funding opportunities, including from the school district, the county, and from private individuals to make that a reality.
You know what I think is a really good idea that Bob had about just building the parking in Glen Eyrie, because we already know the cost of that. We've already been through that. We just have to, the Glen Eyrie, the addition is like 1.7 or something like that. But that would solve a number of problems. One is you have expansion room, but the other thing is it's just a seedy area for our beautiful town. It doesn't look good over there. And then all the shenanigans that go on underneath that parking structure at night.
And being down at that level, Charlie could speak to it more, but it doesn't impact the historic aspect of the building, right? You're just sort of dealing with the lower level.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I just can't say this strongly enough. I don't want the community to hear us talking about destroying the library building. If we're talking about an aspirational renovation, it has to be a historic restoration at the same time.
Agreed. Okay, so do we have consensus about, the idea of looked at an aspirational library that would be, expensive, but would add programming to meet the needs, and then also give us the opportunity to look at historic restoration, and then leveraging county, school district, and private donors to help fill the gap to make this a reality, with a So then that leads to the question of what should be prioritized within the $4.2 million budget. My preference would be to figure out how we could, really move that aspirational planning forward as quickly as possible so we mitigate the amount of money because I hate the idea of throwing good money, away, which is what we're essentially going to be doing if we just put all that into, existing improvements.
Unless there are some infrastructure things that can be done as part of that funding that would be able to benefit a renovated building. I was in there the other day and there were issues with the air conditioning system and all kinds of things.
There are some
Put new
things.
money in it.
There are some things that need to be finished, but I think that the option and the communication with the county is we are going to attempt to, have them understand a plan that has a couple different options or off ramps, I should say. Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, misstating this. Just to kind of buy ourselves a little bit of time. But I think we can get through this relatively quickly, at least the preliminary framework of our relationship with the school district and the Friends of the Library and the potential for some community outreach, to start thinking about additional funding.
I mean, the county supervisors are giving themselves a 25% raise, and I all know our Supervisor Foley was the only one who rejected that. So this idea that they don't have money, while they don't have money, but they're giving themselves a raise. So I'm just going to say that. But I think that to Dave's point, I think we should push back very hard against this idea that that we have to be putting good money into something where we could potentially could deploy that later. I think I would make the exception of, to Hallie's point, air conditioning or something that's really about like kind of health and safety in a way. Like you can't have a building where there's not air conditioning. So I would that's where I would draw the line. But other than that, I think we should figure out how we can prioritize plans for a truly world-class, aspirational, historic facility, and then figure out the funding sources to make that happen.
Hey, Dave, in Newport, did somebody get naming rights for that?
The rooms on the interior are all named.
Yeah, so we have naming rights too. We can get some money that way.
Yeah, so Mark and I have been talking about some strategic opportunities. So I think what we could also do is, if we get some sort of a conceptual idea, we could use that sort of as a way to say, like, look, we can only do this if we get this other money, and use that as sort of a way to create an incentive for people to step up. Because we have a lot of money in this community, and I think you can judge a community on its library, and having a world-class library is something that we can all be proud of, that reflects our values. So good. Any other feedback that we need on the library? No? Okay. So then now should we go to, you want to go to the CRC? Or Forum? I have Forum Theater first. Let's handle that. Forum Theater, what do we think?
Well, I think Morris's point is an excellent one, and I've met with some of the arts groups. I mean, I think without the ADA, right now, there's a high level of concern renting it out without the ADA improvements, because you're at risk if something goes wrong. I think it's a fairly low cost. It'll make that space functional from an ADA compliance standpoint and more rentable. And I don't think I've had a little bit of exposure to the Playhouse concept of opening up, but I think they're kind of separate issues. I don't think you think of them as one. I mean, there should be some, there's probably some level of overlap, but I think this space really isn't usable until you do the ADA compliance. So I think we should move ahead with that.
Yeah, I'm in favor of moving ahead, and I think that we need to figure out something. Maybe this is part of Sue as our work with the Irvine Policy Committee, because I think that's the appropriate place to really figure. It's an upgrade, which is that sort of part of that purview, and we need to figure out cost sharing. And also, I think what we wouldn't want is to put all this money into it, but then have restrictive policies that get in the way of access, because that's sort of been what's happened in the past, and we need to make sure that doesn't. So I think we'd want to look at this in the context of the broader access policies with the Festival of the Arts.
I agree.
That's how I would look at this. I wouldn't want to just give away the money and then, not have access for all the groups in town. So I think.
Yeah, it has a lot of problems. Like the acoustics are terrible in there, and the stage is not very big. Remember when we had Lagunatics, there's no room in the back. I mean, it's very difficult to put on any kind of a show there.
Well, I mean, there's I think some opportunities. One of the people I met with over there was Steve Wood, and he thinks The acoustics are fine. Well, they need some work, but he's willing to do some work on it and provide, some, and I think the Quilters might be willing to add to that. So there's ways, without rebuilding the whole thing, there's ways to make it functional for, it sounds like from more music standpoint from what Steve was saying. So anyway, I think it's worth pursuing. I think Alex's idea is right to get with the FOA.
Yeah.
And hammer it out.
In terms of, so the question, should upgrades go beyond ADA compliance to support broader access? How do we answer that?
I think we were asking, we have the ADA upgrades, which I think we have funding, I believe at least to do. But if the council was interested in going beyond that, that just takes care of the ADA issues. There were other issues that were brought up from the arts, just the size and I think the sound, some things you heard tonight. But if the council wanted to go beyond that, we could. But we were just here, one of the things why we brought it forward is we have money to the ADA, you'll get better access to the Forum Theater, but that's the extent where the funding kind of ends. It doesn't really improve the facility at all. It just gives you better access to it.
So, and then Bob, to your point, based on, because I haven't had a conversation with Steve in a while, are you saying that he's supportive of just the ADA and that's what Morris is saying too, or are we saying that we need to go beyond that?
I don't know if Morris has any input on that, but I don't know.
I think what can happen, Morris, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you can actually do the ADA improvements as an interim solution just to keep the use happening or the availability. And then if you wanted to make other improvements later to the interior, that's the ADA is primarily on the outside of the building.
So why don't we, for this one, because I think there's consensus that we want to make sure that this is coupled with broader access policies for the Irvine, so why don't we direct this to the Irvine Bowl Policy Committee to work out some sort of agreement to bring back to council on that?
May I add a point of clarification?
Go ahead.
This question was focused at looking at the Festival of Arts Centers much more broadly. If you go and look at some of the design options, we've done some significant additions to the Irvine Bowl theater space to provide them more storage and workshop areas. The proposal also includes a civic art center in there where there could be leased studio spaces for artists, performance space, things of that nature. So I think when we were asking this question, we were looking at, do you want to expand broader to those bigger elements? With this accessibility comment, I agree with Morris. Expanding into the interior is, critical. You can't just do accessibility up to the front door and then leave the inside non-compliant. And along the way, if you want to do some more incremental improvements for acoustics, I think you can do that in the range of budget that was shown here today.
So I think that really I think we should look at those other options, but we have to do it in conjunction with what sort of the festival's interested in. But I think we should be open to those ideas. But
I think we should be open to those ideas, and I think we should be hesitant to invest huge amounts of money without getting really clear on use policies.
So why don't we have the Irvine Bowl Policy Committee work with the Festival of the Arts and figure out kind of an approach going forward? I think that sort of achieves the goal that we're all talking about, because ultimately we wouldn't be able to do it if we wanted to without their buy-in, just like they wouldn't be able to get our money without our buy-in. So that's sort of the collaboration and okay, so do we have clear?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
That's fine. I think having the Irvine Bowl, but every one of these we've talked about, we sort of are looking at the aspirational, the way down the road kind of thing. This is not ADA compliant. And if you're going to use the space, it needs to be ADA compliant. So get something done that's ADA compliant. The bigger picture you're talking about is years off. So get something that functions soon.
Yeah, but I think what we're saying also is that we don't want to put city money into something if it's not going to be open to everyone.
But
I'm not disagreeing with
Yeah.
you on that. That's an easy fix. I mean,
Yes.
they're gonna agree to that. But I mean, to say we're gonna not do anything to remove the ADA non-compliance until we look at this whole.
No, I
vision,
agree. I agree with you.
don't
But I think
that's
that we
smart.
should be talking about it. So the question that they asked was, do we want to be have an interest in going beyond that? And I think my response would be that those discussions should be something that we have in collaboration with them if we were to go beyond ADA. But it's a longer term approach. I agree. So are we on the same page there? Okay.
I just want to clarify. So for the ADA issues, that is moving forward and not going to with the rat, with everything else, right? It's not going back to the.
No, so I think both of them are going on that route, but they're on separate paths, where the ADA thing is a more immediate thing that we all agree. But then if there were to be, to your question about should we go beyond that, beyond, you know, you could do the ADA immediately and then look at the other stuff in the long term, right?
And that's going to the festival with the board. That's.
No, so the ADA thing, we need to figure out an agreement. If the city provides money, I think what the consensus is that I'm hearing is we want to make sure there's clear access provisions as it relates to the use, right? Then, so that's path one, right? Separate path is that if we were to talk about anything at this facility, we'd want to, you know, like you were talking about art spaces and all of that, which I'm intrigued by that idea. We don't need to wait on that for the ADA spaces, but that would also be something that needs to be done as part of the Irvine Bowl Policy Committee.
Policy Committee. So
Yeah.
The ADA comes back, basically move forward, and everything else, the other concepts,
Yeah,
which were brought, go to the Irvine Bowl Committee.
Well,
and discussed.
and
Both do.
both do, because the ADA needs to be done in a way where we ensure that access is provided.
Okay, so both go. Okay.
But one is a short-term thing and one's a more long-term vision. Same page?
Not quite.
Okay.
Are we going to continue, Alex and I, on the subcommittee, or how's this going to work after
Do we
this?
need to?
Well, I think somebody is going to need to work with staff a little bit. So it's not quite just as easy as figuring out the ADA for this particular building. And I think that you would want to look at it in a couple of, probably 3 different ways. You know, we talked about the acoustic. I can't remember the area behind it, that retaining wall behind that, if there was any staged expansion. I just think it deserves a conversation without just throwing this at staff and asking them to come back with an ADA solution. I think there's also some things in that snack bar and some things that the festival had talked about, making some improvements in the restrooms below it. I just think that it's not, I don't think we need to make it overly complicated, but I think a conversation needs to be had about the building itself. So
the question becomes, who are the best representatives to have those conversations?
or how do you want to go about this, Gavin?
I don't mind having the ad hoc committee continue if the council's, I think it's helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
And just so I understand, the ad hoc committee would continue to look at these, and maybe I would say a lighter version of some of the concepts that we had to, because there are improvements to the snack bar areas and other things that were part of another concept, but you could, you know, take those components out as part of the ADA improvements as well.
Right, but with the focus on the ADA.
Focus on the ADA.
Right.
So that you don't, when someone with a wheelchair is there, you don't have to have someone standing by to carry the person out of it. So we don't have to have that. Agreed. Okay. Any other feedback on the Forum Theater? No. Okay. What is next? Is that the CRC?
And like,
Why don't we look at those together? So, I mean, my approach when I looked at the CRC is, with the existing facility, you're really limited on sort of what you can do in terms of achieving, you know, a lot of recreational activities beyond sort of the gym and the field. And if you really wanted to transform it into, you know, like a world-class recreation center, it would cost tens of millions of dollars, and we don't have that money. And so the way I sort of looked at it is that the CRC provides an opportunity to create revenue. And I think, you know, to Gary Kasich's point, in conjunction with the Rubies, there's a lot of, you know, further revenue opportunity that could be used to really fund, you know, a world-class recreation center at Lang Park, which I think is the place where you could, you know, to the city manager's point, have a lot more parking to deal with beach visitors, but also have more recreational services all in one location. And the only way to get there is to create revenue. And so that's where the CRC could come in potentially with keeping the gym. So that's sort of how I looked at that, is we could either kind of keep the status quo where you keep the same buildings there, and then you keep Lang Park as it is, but we're not really any better off necessarily, where if we create a revenue opportunity that could help fund those improvements at Lang Park. That's sort of how I look at this. Interested to hear what my colleagues think on on that point.
Well, I think the first question on CRC housing has got to be, from a practical standpoint, the city attorney's going to have to be involved, with Surplus Land Act. You can't just convert this to luxury housing. It's not going to happen. The HCD, I don't think would approve that, but we got to figure out what the mix would be and what the revenue opportunities potentially would be. I disagree with you a little bit, Alex. I think I'm not rejecting the concept at all, but I think the gymnasium, the field, the building, the separate building, which used to be the middle school building down the back with sort of the opportunities there for art. You could use those, I think, as art centers. I mean, there is a lot more that can be done there in the existing configuration. The middle building is a little problematic, it's kind of limiting. But it's worth looking at, but we shouldn't, I think we need to look at the housing, what's realistic for the housing.
I have a question that I'm a little frightened to ask, so I apologize. Why would we, as a city, choose to convert a significant portion of this property to residential versus just selling the entire property?
No, I think we should look at selling the property, but I'd always prefer, I don't think as a city we should ever sell. I think we should just do like a 99-year ground lease like that. But I would agree with you. It's not necessarily, we shouldn't be overly prescriptive about what it is. It's just do we want to create a revenue generating use, or would we rather have, use it for a city asset?
Yeah, we just have to do quite a bit more homework on this scenario because there's a lot of things that we don't know. Particularly, we don't know the value of the property. We paid, what, 23 million for it? Worth a lot more than that.
So what's your point, Sue? So do you think we could use it as a revenue generating opportunity, or do you think?
Well, I don't think we'll ever be sorry at some point that we did that to set ourselves up with a better tax base.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll be sorry in the long run. It's just, it's just getting there with the community that, and I think the opportunity for us to, we're always going to need more money. And I think that's a good source. I like that property a lot. I liked it when we bought it. I liked it when we walked it, but there is some impracticality of it. And, so we just need to figure out what it is we can do there. What could we propose to the community and what the ramifications might be.
A moment ago, Dave mentioned the parking at Lang Park, and that there could be some parking solutions. If you took it even a step further, it's, if you go down there during the summer months and you see the backup that comes out of that parking lot on the ocean side, it's kind of the Montage Park parking lot. Cars go down there and they get stuck and then they can't get out, and then it causes a traffic jam. I know this is way out there thinking, but I'm not sure where Montage is leasing parking from now for some of their ancillary parking, but what if they leased that parking and so then that was shut down for public parking, and the public parking was transitioned over across the street? I don't know if there'd be any interest in looking at this whole thing in a holistic kind of approach, meaning all of those things, what to do with the CRC, Lang Park, and across the street, bringing in what Dave mentioned about parking opportunities.
Okay, so just stepping back for a second, I think we kind of have to figure out, because we don't want to move. So it sounds like there's a question of, for the CRC, do we want to use this do we want to explore the idea of a revenue generating use here, or are we all saying, we want to use this for city? That's sort of the thought. I think let's start there, because we need to make this productive.
But we're saying that there would be a CRC, it would be at Lang Park. Is that what you're saying? It's not, we wouldn't have one.
Yeah, but the question is about, we have to talk about it in the context of each facility. So do we think that, so my position is that we need to look at revenue. We don't have enough money as a city to do all this stuff. And I think we need to look at the CRC as a revenue generating use, and we need staff to bring back more options. And, as Bob indicated, in compliance with state law, HCD and all that. That's sort of the fundamental question I think we need to answer first, where the council is on that. So, Hallie, what do you think about that question?
I'm not convinced that a revenue generating
Got it.
program is the right way to go. I think that there's a way to use the space for city benefit and resident benefit in a more effective way than we're using it now.
Okay.
Can we afford to do that? I'm not sure.
Got
I
it.
guess I would be open to either option.
Either option of what?
Turning it into a revenue generating something.
You
or
want more analysis.
I want more analysis. Yeah, I want to understand our options better, and I want to understand what the community wants more.
Got it. Sue.
Well, I guess my question too is how much do we have to invest in the current CRC? Because we don't have enough parking. So we didn't, we talked about at one point building a pool there, but we didn't have enough parking because our code requires that we build a bunch of parking for a pool. So I'm just trying to understand like what, if we were to keep it the way it is, how much more money would we have to put into it to make it more useful to the community versus what we could get for the property under a number of different scenarios.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, I don't think I have enough information to answer your question.
So I think that's a good point. So do we have, so maybe, 'cause I think do we have any cost estimates of what alternatives would have been for, to Sue's point, of like how much money it would cost to make improvements to that site?
Sorry, I missed the question. Sorry.
So her point was basically, do you want to restate your point?
Yeah. So we have this facility and we have some restrictions because we don't have enough parking because our code requires, like we put in a pool, we needed, I don't know how many spaces, but a ton of spaces and other things that we need to accommodate there. So I guess we need to understand what the full vision is and what it would cost to get there versus what the trade-off is if we were just to look for, revenue opportunities for that property.
So we've spent a lot of time looking at this particular piece of property. I think we've come up with well over 5, closer to 10 different options that range from entirely residential to doing nothing and reusing what we have there today and everything in between. I think if you wanted to, we can dive a little deeper into some of the options that are available and some presentations that we can pull up on the screen.
Let's do that.
We can share a little bit of conceptual cost that goes around that so you get an idea of where we've looked. But I think if you want some detailed concrete analysis, you should let us maybe go back, refine some of the design options, and then come back.
Well, I think what we really need to do is we need to give some high-level direction here because we really want a facilities master plan. We have to give high-level direction to you guys, or else we're just going to be spinning. And so I think you need to have those cost estimates at a high level, and this doesn't have that right now. But beyond that, at a certain point, it's like we have to. Anyway, go ahead.
I think you've got it really. I mean, and it's not going to happen in 15 minutes. It sounds like there's been a lot of work done, right? Charlie's saying on a full range of alternatives from all residential to utilizing an existing facility. I think Hallie and Sue are both, raising questions. We just need a lot more analysis.
I agree.
It'll be a study session of its own, which is what are the revenue opportunities? What are the conversion costs for the existing things? So I think that's the direction.
That's a good point. So why don't we do that? Why don't we have another study session, or even it could just be an agenda item where we basically focus on this site. What are the costs of the different approaches, and why don't we combine that with Lang Park? What do you guys think about that?
I think that's a great idea.
So you say combined with Lang Park?
Where we give, the council needs to be presented the range of options, because do you have cost estimates for those high level? You mentioned 5 plans. Okay, so I think the council needs to be presented with all those plans. I don't think you need to do more analysis beyond those 5 plans. And then why don't we have, is there a way, Dave, for you to, because I think it sounds like what I'm hearing from my colleagues that there needs to be more analysis on what the revenue, and I think it's a fair question about what the revenue opportunity, because if it's, let's say it's $100 million, that changes the conversation than if it's $30 million, right? That's a $70 million. So maybe could we work with like, what's that firm that everyone, Kaiser Marson or someone like them, to just give us at a very conceptual level the opportunities on that site? So then that way the council can be presented with a full range of what the cost could be for different approaches compared with, what the revenues could be and different approaches.
Can you guys remind me, did you guys take a shot at that too?
So our scope was specific to basically civic improvements
Yeah.
and land prep. So we have the cost for all of that, but we have not identified real estate value.
So we could
or
potentially have
complicated-
somebody else look at that.
Dave, could you bring them in with your contracting authority at
I think so.
at a, you know, because I don't think that's
Yeah.
it's just a very high level residual land value of different options. And then that way we have, council can be really fully informed with the different range of costs for civic, you know, for civic uses. And then in the context of looking at the improvements, if we were to bring in, you know, Kaiser Marston or someone else.
Would it be appropriate to bring in the public at that point too and really hear from the community and what they're looking for?
Yeah, I think that'd be the opportunity for the community to weigh in.
So as we look at this, I think that we looked at the sports fields at Lang Park, but I would like the conversation and have a council to understand about the gym that's there now. There's a lot of deferred maintenance on that gym. And then there's that school building that we lease out. You know, the roof is covered with plastic, and I'm not sure what the city's relationship is with that tenant and who's responsible for that. But I just think that we should get a snapshot of where we're at with our plans for that, or our commitment to that school.
So,
Let me make sure I understand what we're bringing back at a regular session item. It's a discussion about the CRC with the various proposals that Griffin and LPA have already worked on, with some revenue estimates associated with each. And then we'll also tie that into the Lang Park concepts, because you guys have done a lot of Lang Park concepts too.
just sharing.
That's
And
right.
Maybe we do a study session so that way we can keep the cost lower so we don't have to have them stay for the whole meeting.
Okay.
So, but just to be clear, it's the revenue opportunities of the alternative side of it, right? If we were to look at.
That's right.
Right, not, so, and bring in some sort of an expert who can provide that at a very high conceptual level, so the council knows, you know, what are we dealing with at a high level, because we don't need to get.
And it'd be revenue from parking at Lang, right? That too?
I mean, I think if you want, but.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that.
Okay.
I think it's a lot of money.
Okay.
Sorry, not that I'm all focused on that, but I think it's a lot
But I think we want to get to
of opportunity.
the key question is sort of, do we want to use the CRC as a revenue generating opportunity, or do we want to use it as
That's
a
the key
place to
question.
expand city?
Yeah.
And that's, council
Okay.
needs to kind of provide an answer on that. And it sounds like we have, does everyone think that from what we have, we can have an answer on that question?
Yeah, I'm sure we can. I think the revenue aspect of it, though, is contingent on a lot of assumptions. I think our community development department has to be involved, right, in terms of what are realistic in terms of entitlements, the HCD question that I raised, because all of that's going to drive a pro forma that changes the outcome dramatically on the value.
That's what Kaiser Marston would look at, like the HCD and all that, or whoever it is, but I agree. And looking probably not at what the existing zoning is, but what it could be, because we would be in the power to change that. That would probably be important. I mean, but what's also, I think bringing community development is good to see what's like feasible from a practical standpoint. Okay, good. Any other feedback on, it sounds like we have sort
Can
of,
I ask a question?
go ahead.
To help us kind of scope what you've just asked for, one of the critical aspects of this was how deeply the city wants to abide by the zoning analysis and the municipal code that might go along with this property. In particular, the hillside protection zone that's behind it. As we go into that analysis, do you want us to stay true to the code and abide by that holistically, or do you want us to take liberties there to deliver highest and best use?
I think, why don't you look at options for us? Because what we're in the power to do is we have the zoning authority. And so if we could, you know, and we'd want to do it, of course, in a compatible way with the community. But I think by limiting ourselves to the zoning, it just seems like that could potentially not be looking at all the revenue opportunities.
Okay, I was just thinking of the cost that goes along with that analysis. The city could save a substantial amount by kind of giving itself some liberties. Adding in the zoning analysis and doing multiple options just increases the cost of that analysis.
That's a good point. What about just,
Explain that one more time.
he's just saying he doesn't want to be in a position where he has to do a bunch of different.
Oh, I see.
So it's like, do we want to,
We can,
go ahead.
we
I
can do
think you could, I think you could give a general, it doesn't have to be an in-depth analysis, but I think that we could talk about percentages. So if you didn't comply with the residential hillside protection, I think we could make some assumptions, some density assumptions that would give at least the council enough.
Okay. Anything else on that? And I think Lang Park would fit into this. I mean, I think the idea of just relocating the pickleball courts and paying $12 million just to do that without any recreational benefit for the community doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I agree.
But I think it needs to be part of the broader conversation with the CRC. And I think you should, at that meeting, you could present all the different options for Lang Park for the council to look at. Because I also wouldn't want to, if we were to look at a revenue generating use for the CRC, I think we'd want to make sure that we're not just taking away recreational opportunity. I think we'd want to be doing it in a way where we're actually expanding recreational opportunities than what we have today, including the CRC. Okay, what other feedback do you need from us?
We'll be back at the next meeting, trying to lay all of this out so the council can see exactly the next steps going forward.
Well, I know we kind of went through the list of staff questions. I mean, there's a couple other things real quick that I want to
Go ahead, Bob.
raise, which are, I'm very concerned. I know you had a do group 1, group 2, group 3. To me, fire stations 2 and 3 seismically in subpar. I don't want to leave those for a long period of time down the road. There's communications at fire station 3 that I think are critical to South County that are, we've heard repeatedly at EOC, they're just not in good shape, right? So the structure is not in good shape. So I would hope that we could look to advance improvements to the other fire stations sooner rather than later, and maybe if we have revenue, we can do that. The last point, just quickly, was looking at the community outreach summary and some of the strong desire for improved services at the Suzy Q. We haven't addressed it all, but that was a $1 to $2 million item. And it seems to me, why not take care of that? Probably in conjunction with the seniors, like we did the building, do 50-50. City could get that done and match it with the seniors.
You guys know specifically what they're asking for when they say what's in their wish list there?
It's really about more office space and, more program uses. It's kind of, reimagining some of the areas a little bit more.
Okay.
So movement of interior walls mostly?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's kind of within the envelope.
And so that would be in our final report, right? So at that time, we could move that, because I agree with you, Bob. I think we should move fire stations 2 and 3 to group 1 in terms of prioritization. And I think that I like the idea of the 50-50 on the Suzy Q. I think that's a good idea.
Can I, of Councilmember Whalen, do you mean in fire stations 2 and 3, just making sure they're upgraded quickly, or upgraded is a waste of money if we should redo the whole thing in terms of moving from phase 1 into the bucket 1?
You mean replacement versus repair?
Right.
I don't know the relative costs, and I defer
We
to
can show you
others.
both.
But I mean, the seismic has to be addressed.
Yeah.
Minimum.
Okay.
So Dave, if we did an analysis, and I'm going to call it a city building, let's call it a city light of this facility, and if you were more involved with the needs assessment, just to kind of, I'm just wondering, I imagine that there might be an opportunity at some point to pull some of these different departments back under this roof, and there might be some efficiencies and some, that could be had in some of that. And I think that there's some, there's some upgrades that have to be done eventually here, and I would just like to at least get it moving. So what do you think? Do you think that that's something that you have time for to actually be involved, or do you have somebody that could deal with that?
I was thinking of that as we were talking about Fire Station 1 moving over there, whether you could do something that combines a renovation of the North City Hall building and the fire station, and it makes it all an essential services. And how high could you go? 30 feet? Can you?
Yeah. Well, 36, but
36.
And then also,
Yeah.
you would have the fire station
Right.
currently that you could possibly expand, the
Right.
police department into. And I know that the police department, I think it was 17,000 square feet, but I was thinking maybe if you were a little bit more involved with the needs assessment, you might be able to fine tune some of these.
Okay. Happy to
that
do that.
something that you think?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, other comments from council members? Sue? Mark?
One more thing. So we looked at the sports field at Lang Park, and I know that we're doing this big financial analysis with the St. Catherine's and all that. But one of the things, let's just assume that we left the rec center where it's at. I still think that we should look at those facilities and that school building and figure out what we're going to do. I think I heard that that gym right now is, am I right? Maybe dance classes and things of that nature. And I'm just was wondering, well, why couldn't that move over into the other facility, and then there would be some freed up space or something to do with the back end of that park? I don't know. There's going to be a point in the near future we need to look at that building because it needs some help. And what our commitment is to that school.
Is that gym, I mean, I've been in it, I can't think of it. Is it a full-size gym? Is it? Okay.
It's fairly low ceiling though, isn't it? Yeah, it's certainly an older gym.
No.
They do play volleyball in that gym.
Really?
Yeah, there's drop-in volleyball.
You're talking about CRC, you're talking about Lang
If
Park?
Stu's playing it.
No, I'm talking about the CRC.
Yeah, we're talking about Lang
Never
Park.
mind. Apologies.
I would be
misunderstood.
shocked. Maybe toddler volleyball you could play. Okay, so I think this was very a good discussion, and at a high level, I think as a city we're almost 100 years old and we need to invest in our infrastructure. So I appreciate all the great work that the team here has done on this, and I think ultimately what our number one priority has to be public safety. When I look at all the public safety needs for replacing these fire stations, it's hard to see how we're able to fund it with, even if we were to look at a revenue enhancement in the form of a tax or something without some revenue generating, use here. And so I think that's really, we need to look at this from a public safety perspective. And so I appreciate the work. I think ultimately what we want to be moving towards is where we have a long-term facilities financing plan like Newport Beach does, where we're projecting out our needs over the next 20 years in terms of funding. And that way we're able to adequately save and fund those projects, because if we're not investing in our infrastructure, we're not doing what our residents need. So again, appreciate the great work. Hopefully we can, I think there were a lot of good feedback that allows for this to sort of move forward without being in a state of paralysis. And I'm hoping that we can continue to provide good feedback, and so that when we have a final report here, it really creates a runway for us as a city to make these necessary investments. So again, appreciate the public who came, and looking forward to next steps.
Yeah, really appreciated working with you guys and your patience. And this was quite a process, wasn't it? But anyway, it was a pleasure working with you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And thanks to the mayor and the mayor pro tem for all this work. It's a lot of work.
Thanks, you guys.
Good. Okay. So now we are going to adjourn this special session. And I have to wait one more minute until we adjourn, we go into closed session. No, we have to start the next meeting. Okay, it is 4:30. So I'm gonna, at this point, we'll let Anne Marie, can we start with a roll call vote?
Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Councilmember Kemp.
Here.
Councilmember Whalen.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Orgel.
Here.
Mayor Renagi.
Here, and at this point, we'll take public comments on closed session agenda items as listed on the publicly noticed agenda. Are there any public comments on the items on closed session? I don't see any. So now we are going to adjourn to closed session, and I'm going to call out, it'll be the items listed on the agenda, but I will call out item number 2, conference with real property negotiator, negotiators on two separate properties. One is 777 and 22466 Laguna Canyon Road. Dave Kiff is the agency negotiator for the city. Mark Schinderman is the negotiating party on the other side. And then the other property is 775 to 793 Laguna Canyon Road, and it is the same parties as previously listed. And so we will adjourn into closed session and see everyone back at 5 o'clock. So good. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good job.